The next of our speakers will be focusing on the aspect of talent, as you know. And Mr. Madu Ratnayake, who is going to be talking to us, has a background in engineering, but also has an MBA from the Postgraduate Institute of Management and an honors degree in software engineering from London, from the City University therein. So his area of work at the present time is as the one who heads I've refused to come to terms with the reality. Madu heads Virtusa's Sri Lanka operations and is a core member of the global management team of Virtusa from its inception, and has played a number of leadership roles for that company in different areas. And he also plays the role of global head of quality for Virtusa worldwide. In addition to what he does in his own company, namely Virtusa, he also has many other interests, not least serving as a board member of the Sarvodaya Fusion organization, which is the ICT for development arm of Sarvodaya. So that extends his range and his scope. But of interest is talent. And he's going to speak to us on the future of talent, and we invite you to pay close heed as he does and ask him questions afterwards. Madu Ratnayake.
Okay, I think I have the added task of keeping you awake as well, in addition to trying to do my presentation. First of all, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation and to the opportunity to share some of our thoughts on this area. I think before I start, I want to have a disclaimer. I think there's, I'm talking in an HR conference about talent. I think there's many of you here who probably forgets enough HR in a day that I know in all my life. So, take it with a pinch of salt. My thoughts are really around what we experience and what we do in our organization. I'll give you a little bit of background about the context and why I thought about talking about talent. Virtusa is a global IT services company. We have globally about a little over 4,000 people. We operate in multiple countries. We operate in US, UK, Netherlands, Hungary, in Budapest, Middle East, in Dubai, and Hyderabad, Chennai, in India, as well as Sri Lanka. So we have pretty globally connected company which provides services to multinationals around the globe. So some of the experience I want to share is really stemming from what we see either within our own organization or some of the multinationals that we work with, and that's really what I want to bring. We're trying to do a bit of crystal ball gazing about the future, and I think one thing, as I see some of the large multinationals that we work with. If you take IT industry, IT services industry in particular, probably are early adopters of a lot of these practices, technology, in terms of how they work. So, if you look at an industry like IT, I guess you can look, they're slightly probably ahead of the horizon. If you see some of those companies and how they do what they do, you can get some idea about what follows, right? And a lot of the practices that large companies do, especially in the IT space, are generally, probably slightly, maybe a couple of years ahead of before they get adopted. So that's why I want to really talk about future of talent from that point of view. And if you look at global best employers in many countries, you will find generally there are a number of IT companies in that list. The Google to the Microsofts to the Oracles and so forth, right? So that's the really context I'm coming from, and there's certainly no theories here. I'm just going to share some experiences around it. So the agenda is three things. I'd like to look at what the work will look like and what are some of the forces or paradigm changes that are happening around work, right? And and what does the workforce look like in the future, and who will be doing this work, and perhaps some imperatives for us from HR and talent management point of view, how we can look at that. So those are the three things I'd like to cover, and I'd like to really draw upon two people which a lot of the thoughts from which is in your presentation. So we'll start with work. Right? I think there is something fundamentally changing in the way we work. Some paradigm shifts happening around. Okay, all right, I'll try and get on the stage. So some fundamental changes in the paradigm, how the work is happening, right? I think two factors are, one is globalization, right? And the second one is technology. Those are the two things, I believe, among many other things, that drives the way we work. Right? Let me elaborate a little bit on this. Globalization, I think that's, all of us have heard about globalization many times over. And I think there's a nice, interesting book on globalization, which I want to draw some stuff around. If you look at probably many decades ago, Columbus went around the world, came back and said, world is a sphere, world is round. Right? No surprise there. And few years ago, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Friedman, New York Times columnist, went around the world, obviously didn't sail around the world, flew around the world, came back and said world is flat. Right? That's what's really driving globalization and what's really fundamentally changing the way we look at work, the works get done. So, he talks about three waves of globalization. The first wave of globalization, what he calls globalization 1.0, which happens up until about the 1800s, where nations went around the world and globalized the world for generally resources. Right? And the colonization, the British went around, the French went around, and so forth, Dutch went around, and so forth. And they made the world slightly a smaller place from a disconnected world before. Then globalization 2.0, as Friedman talks about, it really is driven by multinationals. The large multinationals went around the world and really globalized the world for markets and labor. Right? And they made it even a smaller place. And what is interestingly happening right now, up until from about 2000, is what he calls a globalization 3.0, which is really the individuals going around the world globalizing for opportunities. Right? If you take an individual now, the constraints or limitations that you have to move anywhere, any part of the world, anytime, to do anything is very, very minimal, right? And is virtually non-existent if you're in the western part of the world. If you're in our part of the world, maybe there are regulatory restrictions like visa and so forth, but otherwise there is literally no restriction in your movement and no restriction in your ability to interact with anybody around the world. So this, the globalization 3.0 is what I want to talk about. What it drives is two things, right? One is production. Where is the global production happening?